Welcome back to the buyingrealestateblog.com. I'm Jason Fleming with Keller Williams Realty and Group 4610, and I'm joined today with Patrick Richie. He is the author of The Credit Roadmap, and he's also a GRI finance instructor for the Arizona Association of Realtors.
Yep.
All right, fantastic. Patrick is joined with us today because he understands credit like few people that I've met, and I get a lot of questions in my line of work about credit, and it's so important to understand. And so I wanted to bring that to you with credible information, and that's what Patrick is doing here. Patrick, I sell a good amount of homes, and a lot of what's being sold right now is short sales and foreclosures. Well, obviously for something to be foreclosure, there was a homeowner who defaulted and the bank ended up taking the house back, or possibly they did a short sale on their house and they're living somewhere else. A lot of people are having questions around how does a short sale, how does a foreclosure affect my credit? Could you kind of expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, and keep this in mind. There's a lot of variables here. It depends on how the bank chooses to report it. So if somebody makes an arrangement that, hey, the bank's not going to report me delinquent or whatever the case may be, but really the biggest impact is going to come from how many months of delinquency do I have. So if in the balancing of, is a short sale better than a foreclosure, I think the scope of it needs to be greater than just the credit score. Because keep in mind, no matter what happens to my credit, it's always going to rebound at some point in time. Even in the worst case scenario of if I have a foreclosure and a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, yeah, my scores are going to be tanked. But how long will it take for me to rebuild from there? Probably 2 to 3 years, 3 years for sure. I had a client one time, she had gone through that exact scenario. 3 years and 2 months later, she's back in the high 600s, low 700s. Keep in mind, it's always going to be in the middle of your 3 credit scores, but she did the right thing. She went through it. Time is what's going to be on my side. So Fair Isaac classifies the short sale, the foreclosure, and the deed in lieu of foreclosure as a serious derogatory item. And so I think a lot of people get a little off track because there were some quotes out there in the media that I think were perhaps misquotes, where somebody would be told, okay, if you go through a foreclosure, your score will drop 250 points. If you go through a short sale, your score will drop 100 points. Well, that's not really accurate because it's the number of months of delinquency. We generally have this tendency to think that a foreclosure will automatically entail more delinquency, which would probably be the case, and then a short sale would be fewer months of delinquency, which may or may not be the case. But let's say that I'm already 12 months past due on my mortgage, and then all of a sudden I get a short sale to work. Is that going to be any different than I'm going to be worse off because I had 12 months of delinquency versus somebody who was able to who went through a foreclosure and maybe it wrapped up in 6 months. So it's this how it's classified. So Fair Isaac's looking at it as a classification. If you look at the big picture, really any of these, whether it's a foreclosure, a short sale, or a deed in lieu of foreclosure, they're all a failure to meet the obligation of the note. They're all achieving the same thing. Now, it's a different way. The bigger scope of this, the bigger picture is going to be perhaps the short sale alleviates me from any future bad debt. If I can get debt forgiveness, is that going to be better than having something lingering through a foreclosure? Now, granted, in Arizona, you've got anti-deficiency statutes, you've got a lot of positive consumer protection. Well, there's 30 states out there that don't have any protection. So, if you look at 50 sets of state law, plus you've got Puerto Rico and Guam and the Virgin Islands and all that, every state is somewhat different. And so you've got 30 states that really those consumers are in danger of being sued for any deficiency in what's recovered from what's owed on the note for what whatever the property would sell for. Arizona, we're a lot different because we do have a lot of protection there, but it still remains that the short sale may have the advantage of being able to do that in terms of being able to go through the forgiveness. Is that going to save my credit? Not necessarily, but it might. If I can somehow here's the challenge. It's kind of like Bigfoot. I hear people say, "Oh, well, I was able to do a short sale and I was never delinquent." Well, I've never actually seen that happen on a credit report, but if they're claiming that's the case, sometimes people think they're getting something that they're not. I've had people who have said, "Oh yeah, did a short sale, I'm fine," and they ultimately what they really did was they signed an unsecured promissory note. So what they actually did was, instead of being forgiven, they signed an unsecured promissory note that may or may not show up on the credit report, but if they then default on that, now they are no longer protected by the anti-deficiency statutes in Arizona. At that point in time, now they've got a full recourse loan situation against them. So there may be carryover later on. As far as specifically because of the credit, if I just treat it, looking at it from the standpoint of, if I can reduce the number of months of delinquency, that's going to be my best thing. I mean, it's going to affect everybody differently, because a credit report is almost like DNA, to the degree that everybody's credit report is different. It contains different things. If I have 10 positive things versus somebody who has 2 positive things, let's say I've got 10 credit cards that they've all been open for 7 years, they've always been paid on time, I have low balances, and then somebody has 2, and in the same scenario, but they've only got 2 and I've got 10, and something negative happens, it's going to affect them worse than me. So to use a blanket quote to say, if this happens, it'll be a drop of 250. If this happens, it'll be a drop of 100. That's an impossible thing to. That's just not possible, because everybody's different. It's like saying a male who weighs 200 pounds will always be able to bench press 250. I know for a fact that I can't bench press 250 pounds. So that would be a static quote, a static assessment that just is impossible. So look at it from that standpoint. And then I want to just focus on how quickly can this happen. And I know it's not always a quick thing, because a short sale or foreclosure could draw out. But regardless, once I put it behind me, once I get closure of some sort, and then time starts to pass, as far as me being able to qualify again, the safe answer to that is going to be 3 years. That's my safe bet, is that in 3 years I should be able to qualify for an FHA loan. Is it possible that I could qualify sooner on a short sale? It's possible, but keep this in mind. HUD came out in December of 2009, so this, at the end of last year, and said, they basically defined what's called an extreme hardship. So if I have gone through an extreme hardship, I should be able to buy again in probably about 18 months. But here's the thing, an extreme hardship is generally one of 2 things. Number one, my co-borrower has died. How many of your clients have you dealt with where the co-borrower has died? I haven't seen that.
Very few.
It happens.
Very few.
Not very common. Yeah. Or I incurred medical expenses and was unable to work due to this uninsured medical event. Mm-hmm. Now that's way more common, but for a lot of people, it's not quite that extreme. So a lot of times, even though a short sale is different than a foreclosure, a lot of times, as far as guidelines, it's as far as my assumption of when I'm going to be able to qualify again, it's much safer at 3 years, knowing that that's my worst case scenario, but potentially it could be sooner than that. But also knowing that once these events happen, I'm under the microscope. I have to be very, very careful to not let anything derogatory happen again. Sure. Because let's say that all of a sudden I get a collection on my credit report after a short sale or after a foreclosure. See, for some people, they might have to go through bankruptcy as well. And I think that people really do need to look at the big scope of things. One of the pieces of advice I generally give to people is start off talking to a bankruptcy attorney to see what all of your options are, whether you plan on filing for bankruptcy or not, so that because hindsight's always 20/20.
Sure.
And so I at least look to see what's available to me. Of course, a bankruptcy attorney might want me to file, probably wants me to file for bankruptcy. So at least looking into it, but knowing, okay, this is my last resort, perhaps. But for a lot of people, that might be their best thing. So, but at least seeing how it apply to me individually. But knowing that going forward, there's nothing that's going to prevent me from owning again forever. And generally 3 years is our best bet, but I have to know that I've taken care of the problems, I've moved forward, because if I have one bad thing that happens after these serious derogatory items, that could derail me for a number of years. Maybe it goes beyond 3 years, maybe it all of a sudden becomes 7 years. But FHA is going to generally be the mortgage program that people would generally fall into after one of these financial crisis events.
And as far as FHA guidelines at this point, if somebody has a foreclosure, and let's say that it wasn't one of those extreme hardships that you just talked about how many years before they qualify again for an FHA loan?
We're back to 3 years. So
Okay.
So 3 years is always going to be the safe answer to that. So provided that the situation, because what they're going to have to explain to underwriting is, number one, why it happened. Number two, why it was out of their control. then number 3, why is it unlikely to happen again? So if I can explain why it happened, why it's unlikely, why it was out of my control in the first place, but then why it's unlikely to occur again, and that's reasonable and realistic and it makes sense, my answer can't be, oh, well, I was upside down in my home, I decided to just walk away because the market stunk. Well, I don't know, maybe that could happen again, maybe it was in my control. So now it's up for debate. And so generally speaking, though, it would just be that flat, 3 years. It could be longer, though. Let's say that I have a government loan today. Let's say I have an FHA loan, a VA loan, or a USDA loan. If there's a federal claim paid out on my mortgage, whether that I have today, whether it's through a short sale, a deed in lieu, or a foreclosure, if a federal claim is made, it's going to be 3 years from the date that that federal claim has been paid out. Any lender can go into the HUD portal. It's called the Keyver system, the Credit Alert Interactive Voice Response System. You put in the borrower's social security number, boom, it tells you if there's been a claim paid out or not. So a very simple way to find out whether or not it has happened. So that's something that could prolong it beyond 3 years. And then once you get into if I'm going conventional, now we're talking 5 to 7 years. So generally FHA is going to be the way most people are going to go. And keep in mind, things have changed. Things are constantly changing. So 3 years really is kind of that solid at this point that we would expect somebody would be able to come out of this and qualify again.
Cool. Great. All right. Well, thanks so much for that. Appreciate that.
No problem.
And thank you guys for stopping in and checking us out. If you guys have more questions for Patrick about how maybe you can clean up your credit score, he's a great person to talk to you about that. He's got a book, as I mentioned before, the Credit Roadmap.
The Credit Roadmap, and if somebody reads that book and they don't understand everything about credit, then they can email me and I'll personally because I spent a full year writing that thing and researching it and putting it together based on just everything. It was really, thinking about it, it's probably like a 10-year process because I had been teaching on the subject for so long. And then it's a big difference between teaching a class. I can talk for 8 hours about this stuff, but to sit down and to write a book about it when you're not there to answer the questions, that's a whole different platform. So I really did try to design that book to answer every question. So if somebody will actually read, a lot of people don't like to read these days, but if somebody actually read it, they should know everything that they would need to know to conduct themselves from that point. So,
Excellent. Well, you guys can check that out on Amazon.com. Put in the Credit Roadmap, and that should pop up there. Thank you guys so much for stopping in. If you guys are looking at buying a home or selling a home, we have 2 books, and we're giving away a book to people that are interested. You can contact me. My contact information is going to be below this video. One of the books is Your First Home, and then also we've got The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. Both of these books are fantastic books. They were written by Gary Keller, who is the founder of Keller Williams Realty. He's also a New York Times bestseller. So give us a call, and we'll be in contact with you soon. Thanks so much for stopping in. We'll see you soon.